The sun peeked through the windows of the little courtroom, making shadows on the wood floors. It wasn't peaceful, though. You could feel the stress in the air. Everyone was anxious and aware of how important today was. Kody Brown, from that Sister Wives show, was about to face some stuff that could totally change his life. And the family everyone's watched for years. Kody walked in looking calm, but you could see the pressure in his eyes. Reporters and photographers crowded him, snapping pictures like crazy. Pens scratching, papers shuffling, and a cough now and then made the room feel even more tense. Fans at home must have been on the edge of their seats. This was the moment where all the rumors and gossip would finally meet reality. The courtroom was packed. Some of the seats were for family. They looked nervous, avoiding each other's eyes. Other seats held the lawyers, ready to fight. And then there were the regular folks, the Sister Wives fans, curious or just wanting to see some drama. The room buzzed with a weird energy, like something big was about to happen. The judge came in, and the room went silent. Everyone stood up, and the trial began. The tension got stronger, like it was squeezing Kody. The first people called to testify were old friends, people from inside the family, and even some family who were ready to tell their stories. Each person had a piece of what really happened, stuff that had been secret for years. The first person to talk was a former advisor to the family. He spoke quietly, but he said some shocking things. He told stories about Kody controlling everything and making decisions that affected all the wives and kids. He talked about fights that happened behind closed doors, talks that weren't on TV, and decisions that changed the family's lives without everyone agreeing. It made Kody's house seem organized, but with a lot of tension hidden underneath. As the advisor spoke, the jury listened hard, taking notes and looking surprised. Even the judge seemed shocked by what he was hearing. Kody's lawyers tried to interrupt and question what the advisor was saying, but the courtroom realized this was more than just a normal trial. This was the start of the truth coming out, showing holes in the image that had been shown to millions. Then, a production assistant from the Sister Wives show spoke. She talked about how the show was different from real life and how they carefully made Kody look like the perfect dad. But when the cameras were off, it was different. Kody could seem calm on camera, but he was actually dealing with a lot of fights all the time that nearly destroyed, break, crash, split the family. With each person who spoke, the feeling in the room changed. The audience went from curious to fascinated, a mix of not believing what they heard and wanting to know more. Each story gave hints about power struggles, playing with people's feelings, and working hard to keep up the image that people believed. The Brown family, once seen as a weird but nice family, was now seen as a family dealing with power, control, and secrets. Kody didn't say much that morning, holding his hands together and messing with his suit. He looked calm, but his eyes were watching everything. He knew what was said could change how people saw his family, his show, and him. Every story was like a bomb, and everyone watching started to think about what he really did. The judge stopped for a minute, letting everything sink in. Cameras snapped, capturing what the Brown family looked like. Some seemed shocked, some embarrassed, and some upset. These weren't just stories. They were real, personal truths that had been kept quiet for a long time. As the morning went on, the stories got more intense. Family talked about money and how it was given to each wife and what everyone was expected to do. They talked about who would get what when people died, who had to do chores, and what people were allowed to do, painting a picture of a family where Kody made the rules, made the decisions, and wasn't questioned much. What got the viewers, fans interested, hooked, was how real it felt. The feelings, The pauses before answering, the tears, and the times families' voices broke made it feel very interesting, exciting, and dramatic. The show couldn't really show what was going on behind the scenes, the loyalty, the stress, and the agreements that people made. Outside the courtroom, the news and social media were already talking about every little bit of information. Clips went around fast, and people online were going crazy. Fans argued, thought about what it all meant, and shared what they thought about each new thing that was said. It made people remember that what they saw on TV was just one way of looking at things, and the real story was much more complicated, and sometimes scary. By the afternoon, one simple story had come out. Kody Brown was in charge of his house, but it came at a cost. People couldn't get along well. It was hard to do what you wanted to do, and secrets were kept. The audience could feel the pressure building, like something was about to explode. When the judge ended the session for the day, the weight of the morning loomed over him. Kody and his lawyers left the courtroom, followed by cameras. Fans outside shouted questions, trying to see the man whose life had been shown to the world. Inside, the Brown family was facing the truth. The image of being happy had cracked, and for the first time, people were seeing a side of Kody that the show had hidden. The next session would be about discovering the darker secrets, and a courtroom scene was playing out in the media for the whole world. By the end of the first court visit, one thing was for sure. Kody Brown and sister wives would never be considered as they had before. One question lingered, hanging in the air, as Kody left with his attorneys. What had been hidden, and how dark would the secrets be shown? But you could tell his mind was racing. Everyone knew what was coming. The other side had gathered stuff that would reveal the truth about his life, his family, and the image he'd shown the world for years. It started with papers. They looked normal, but they were explosive. There were deals, records, and notes that showed a side of Kody Brown that people hadn't seen. These weren't just numbers. They showed how power and money worked in the Brown family, all controlled by Kody. The judge checked the files, looking hard to read, but she seemed surprised. Then came the recordings. The prosecution played secret audio of Kody talking to his family. The room gasped when it started. The talk seemed okay, but you could tell Kody was telling people what to do, taking charge, and controlling decisions in a way that felt manipulative. In one recording, Kody talked about living places and money with a shocking precision. He didn't just decide things, he planned them, like his family's lives were a business. You could feel the tension when it ended. Some wives looked uneasy, while others seemed frustrated and sad. The papers and recordings weren't just evidence. They showed what the family was really like. Fans of sister wives, who thought Kody was a great leader dealing with polygamy, now saw a more complex and disturbing picture. The TV image was breaking apart, showing the real truth. One shocking piece of evidence was private messages between Kody and some family. These messages showed a man who controlled things subtly, not openly. It became clear that Kody's power wasn't just about decisions. It shaped their feelings, their daily lives, and even what they told the world. The courtroom went wild. The judge looked closely at the documents. Lawyers analyzed everything. People whispered, trying to take in the news. Outside, social media blew up. Clips and images spread fast, shocking fans. People debated if the Kody they knew was the same as the man in court. Then, witnesses confirmed the evidence. Former workers and some family told stories that matched the documents and recordings. One witness said Kody made a decision about a trip, ignoring the wives but making it seem like they all agreed on the show. Another talked about the money, explaining how Kody controlled it to keep his power. The courtroom was hooked. The conversations, papers, and stories created a clear picture. People were seeing the full truth about Kody, not just as a leader, but as a man who hid complex power behind a public image. The most shocking thing was that Kody had changed stories on the show. Production notes and footage showed that some conflicts were guided to keep a certain image of the family. While fans guessed that things weren't real, this proved that Kody changed the stories for TV. The reaction was loud. The courtroom whispered as the prosecution showed emails where Kody talked to producers about scenes. "We need this to look real," one email said, supposedly from Kody. "Make it seem like they all agreed. Don't let anyone question the story." He wasn't just managing his family. He was managing his image like a strategist. For some family, this was personal. They looked upset. Broadcasting private troubles hurt them. One wife whispered, "They never knew the real story." The courtroom felt heavy, realizing the show was fake. Kody's team argued that the evidence was twisted. They said reality TV is always edited and that changes are normal for stories. But the evidence was strong, backed by witnesses and documents. It made a big impression, and everyone watched closely. As things went on, the prosecution showed financial records that showed unequal money for the wives, differences between public and private deals, and deals that showed Kody's control over everything. The documents showed a man who controlled decisions and kept his power, all while looking like a loving family on TV. It was a lot to take in. Each piece of evidence added to the picture of Kody Brown, not just as a TV person, but as a man balancing power, control, and image. Viewers struggled to keep up. The story challenged what they thought about sister wives, Kody, and the family. By the end, the courtroom had seen a big unveiling of private truths. The evidence was clear, emotional, and showed a lot. Kody Brown, with his charm, was exposed as a man whose control went further than anyone thought. The Brown family's secrets were now in the open, in a courtroom full of people and cameras. As Kody left, he faced not just a trial, but public opinion. Social media exploded with reactions, with people dealing with the difference between the show and the truth. This trial set a new tone. Nothing was off limits, and no truth would stay hidden. For the Brown family, this was a turning point. For fans, it was shocking. And for Kody Brown, it would change how the world saw him. One question remained. What other secrets were hidden? And how far would this drama go in showing the man behind the TV image? And hidden messages, things got real. It wasn't about documents or paperwork anymore. The focus shifted to the family. Everyone watched the wives who'd been living under Kody Brown's thumb. They finally got to tell their side, the struggles and sacrifices they hid behind the Sister Wives show. The first wife looked scared when she was called to testify. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were strong. She took a breath and started talking about her life, her voice shaky but getting steady. She said she felt alone, how she had to do what she was told. Everything was about the main man's decisions. She talked about the pressure, how her voice didn't matter, and how she had to play nice to keep things calm. The courtroom was silent, listening. Her words were full of years of hidden feelings. It wasn't about huge fights, but how she had to watch everything she said and did to fit in. People could almost feel how tiring it was to always think about what the main man wanted. It was a world where she couldn't be herself, and being loyal came at a price. The second wife's story was even more real. She told of times she hid how frustrated she was from the cameras. She didn't agree with what Kody did, but she couldn't say anything. Money, the house, what they did every day. Kody was in charge. She couldn't make her own decisions. Sometimes she had to just go with it, even when she felt left out and unimportant. You could see the emotion in her. Her voice changed as she talked. She paused when she felt anger, and her eyes were watery. It was way different than what you see on TV. This was real. The difference between the show and what she lived was huge. The third wife talked about how hard it was to be herself in that family. Being with other wives was tough. They all had different ideas, feelings, and problems. There was love, but there was also stress, deals that had to be made and secrets kept. She remembered when small things turned into big arguments behind closed doors. They only showed the good stuff on TV, so people would think everything was going great. Everyone listened to how honest and open they were. The judge and jury looked at each other, surprised by what they were hearing. The women talked about how they kept their feelings down, worked things out, and how they handled the family stuff. The Brown family was getting looked at differently. It was about juggling stress, loyalty, and what it cost them to live under his authority. Someone who used to be close to the family told about the rules they had to follow. She said what each wife was expected to do, from paying bills to getting along with each other. If the main man didn't like something, you had to be careful. They fixed disagreements fast, not to be nice, but because no one wanted to make the main man mad. It was like the family was always trying to keep the peace, while the main man was in control. They also talked about being on TV and how it made things worse. If they had a fight, the whole world saw it. It made them feel even more stressed, because everyone was watching and judging. Things got even crazier when they brought up the kids. The wives talked about how Kody's decisions affected their kids' lives. He decided about school, when they did things, and the house rules. The kids were growing up in a complicated situation. One of the wives cried when she talked about a time she wanted something for her kid, but Kody said no. The courtroom was quiet. You could tell she was frustrated, sad, and had to give in. It was clear that being in the Brown family meant you always had to talk things over and give in. It was nothing like the happy show they put on for TV. The lawyers made sure the witnesses said everything clearly by asking questions that were very detailed. They showed how different their lives were from how they looked on TV and how the main man controlled everything. The evidence showed that the family was held together by love, but also by authority, deals, and a lot of feelings. The Brown family's life was way more difficult than people thought. Reporters wrote like crazy, cameras caught people's faces, and the jury listened carefully. Outside, people were talking about it on social media. Others were sharing clips, talking about what they felt and thinking about what was right and wrong. The story had everyone hooked. The session ended with a powerful story that stunned everyone. A wife told about how she had to live under rules for years, negotiating what she had to do, and keeping calm with the other wives. She wasn't angry, she was more powerful. Being strong inside was the only way she survive and love her family. As Kody listened, it was clear that something big had happened. The pretty picture of the sister wives' family was falling apart. Now they were just people with a lot of feelings and problems. The women finally spoke up, showing the problem and its cost of living by following the main man. The world now knew about the Brown family. What they shared was way more real, hard, and human than anything on TV. People had a new way of seeing their life. They needed to be compassionate. One question was in the air. If this was only one session, what other secrets and stories are they going to tell in the sessions coming? Picking apart everything he's done. Now he, or at least his lawyers, were ready to speak up. The courtroom was buzzing. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned in, and everyone watching held their breath. This was huge for Kody. People saw all the wild evidence and heard the wives' emotional stories. And now he had to respond. Kody's lawyers came up to the judge with files, looking sure of themselves and with a plan. They'd try to explain things, put them in context, and make them sound not so bad. They said a lot of the claims were taken the wrong way, blown up, or because people were holding grudges. They said reality TV isn't real, it's all edited and made more exciting. What people saw wasn't the whole story. That made sense, but everyone knew there were lots of recordings, papers, and stories from different people. The lawyers had to be careful to defend Kody without making the family members who spoke out look like liars. When Kody finally got on the stand, he kept calm. Everyone watched as he sat down. He was charming and in charge, but you could feel the stress. Kody started talking to the court calmly, saying that it's hard living in the spotlight, keeping a big family together, and being on TV. He talked about sticking together, family, and how hard it is to deal with expectations. He said that to handle such a big family, you need rules and a way to make decisions. He knows it might look bossy, but he said it was needed to keep things running smoothly. Everything I do, Kody said, is to keep my family stable, even if people don't see it. He said he never wanted to shut anyone down, but that it was about keeping a difficult family situation balanced. Even though he was calm and careful, everyone remembered what had been said before. The judge listened closely, asking questions to get things clear, and the jury listened to everything, comparing it to what they'd already heard. People online and in the room were quick to judge everything he said. Social media was blowing up with people either defending Kody or criticizing him. People kept debating, was he a good dad, trying his best, or was he controlling everyone? Kody's team also brought in experts to talk about how hard it is to live in a polygamous family and the stress of being on TV. Psychologists, sociologists, and TV people talked about family stuff, how decisions are made, and how being on TV can mess things up. They said that being watched all the time can make problems seem bigger than they are. This was to try and separate Kody from the bad stuff, making it seem like things were just complicated, not mean. But even with all that, people were still split. Some felt bad for him, saying it was hard to handle so many wives, family issues, and being in the public eye. Others still didn't believe him, focusing on the stories that showed he was controlling, forcing people to do things, and messing with their heads. You could feel the stress, because people couldn't agree on anything, not even the family. Outside, people reacted right away. Social media went wild with comments, guesses, and arguments. Clips of Kody talking were shared everywhere, with people looking at every little detail, like his words, how he stood, and how he sounded. Supporters praised him for being calm, leading, and loving his family. Critics said he was lying, acting arrogant, and still being controlling. Memes and reaction videos flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. News people made everything bigger, calling it a big courtroom drama, with legal and cultural things to think about. Headlines on websites talked about the stress, the shocking stuff, and Kody's defense. Some said he was a man trying to protect his family and image, while others were more critical, questioning his decisions. The trial wasn't just a legal thing anymore. It was a cultural thing that everyone was talking about online. Kody's statement in court made things even more intense. He carefully said he was responsible, admitted to mistakes, but said he was all about family. "I've always done what I thought was best for my family," he said, sounding firm. "I know people won't agree, and that's okay. Things were never done without thought, and I wanted to keep everyone happy and cared for." He was trying to be responsible but also justify things, speaking to both the court and everyone else. Even though Kody defended himself well, the wives' stories still had a big impact. Their stories about feeling alone, not being heard, and being controlled by Kody stuck with the jury and everyone else. The contrast between Kody's calm words and the wives' real stories made it feel like a movie, a real courtroom drama with big consequences. The media made this even more intense. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags and videos blowing up quickly. People analyzed everything, arguing about the ethics, emotions, and the Brown family. The trial turned into a cultural thing, getting attention from TV fans, social commentators, and regular people. Inside the courtroom, you could see the small interactions between Kody and his lawyers, the nods, the quiet talks, and the awkward pauses. Jurors stayed focused, trying to be fair, think critically, and understand complicated people. The judge, who was experienced, led things with authority. By the end of the day, Kody's defense had done okay. He had shared his side, explained his actions, and reminded everyone that big, polygamous families are hard to manage in the spotlight. But the earlier stories and evidence still loomed large. People were split. The family's secrets were still out there, and Kody Brown's story was now more complicated and controversial. As the courtroom cleared out, the question wasn't just about the legal thing, but about what people thought. Would fans still like the charming dad they saw on TV? Or would they remember the man whose decisions caused problems in his family? The trial became a public moment where TV met reality. Outside, reporters surrounded Kody and his team, trying to get quotes and reactions that would be the next headlines. Fans and critics argued online more than ever before, looking at every little thing. The story was changing fast, shaped by the courtroom, social media, and the family's emotions. Kody's defense had explained things, put them in context, and made him seem human. But it also showed that being a leader and in charge is hard, especially when it involves family, emotions, and the media. The Brown family's story, once just for entertainment, was now out in the open, leaving people to think about ethics, loyalty, and emotions. As the day ended, the trial got ready for the final chapters. People were reacting strongly. Kody had defended himself, and the family's secrets had been partly changed, but the story was far from done. The big question was, how would the rest of the sessions reveal the whole truth? And what would happen to Kody Brown, his family, and everyone who had been watching them for years? Seen everything: evidence, recordings, people talking, money stuff, and the wives' stories. But as the trial wrapped up, you could cut the tension with a knife. Everyone there knew the biggest stuff was about to drop. Things had gotten more intense each day, and now Kody Brown's family drama was about to explode, mixing public opinion, what really happened, and everyone's feelings. The lawyers for the prosecution started by going over all the evidence they'd shown before. They pointed out how Kody seemed to control, push around, and mess with everyone through the documents, tapes, and what people said. It wasn't just single events. It was a pattern of how the family had been run for years. They said Kody called the shots in everything from money to where they lived and how the family worked together. One really powerful part was when they compared what was on TV to what really happened. They showed clips from sister wives next to real-life stories, and it was crazy different. Things that looked good and agreed upon on TV were usually staged, directed, or made bigger to keep up a good public image. The room was quiet as everyone, including the jury and family, took in the truth behind the show. Every little thing showed how tough it was to live in that family under a microscope, both from Kody and from the world. The wives spoke again to give their final thoughts. They were honest, and their words hit hard. They talked about how much it sucked not having freedom and feeling like one person controlled everything. They explained how hard it was to get along with Kody and each other while being filmed all the time. One wife said she learned to stay quiet, give in, and be careful with her words to avoid fights, which showed the hidden ways things worked in the family that viewers never knew. What made it so strong was the emotion. You could see years of held-back feelings, being tired, annoyed, a little angry sometimes, but also the real love that kept going despite the problems. The difference between the TV show and real life was clear. Which was supposed to be about their lives had hidden a lot of the complicated and painful stuff they went through. Kody stayed pretty calm during all this, showing he knew everyone was watching and how much was at stake. He listened quietly, not reacting much, keeping his usual cool even when things got intense. But the proof and the wives' stories had started to break down the image he'd built up for years. The people in court, the media, and the world were now seeing a man whose choices had big results, both for his family and for how people saw them. The prosecution then showed the last piece of proof, messages showing Kody helped decide how the family was shown to the public. Emails, texts, and notes from the TV people showed Kody didn't just run his house, but also influenced what was on the show. He had a say in what stories were told, what fights were shown, and what things looked like. For many, this proved what they already thought, that reality TV is fun, but it often hides the real power, feelings, and freedom within the family. People outside the courtroom went wild. The internet blew up with thoughts, opinions, and arguments. Clips of the final statements and evidence went around fast, starting big conversations everywhere. Some fans felt bad for Kody and how hard it was to manage a big plural family, while others hated his control and how it affected his family. Memes and videos popped up everywhere, turning the trial into a huge thing that went way beyond the courtroom. As things went on, Kody's lawyers gave their final arguments. They said family life is complicated and asked people to think about why Kody did things. They talked about how he cared about his family, how tough it was to balance everything, and how much pressure they were under. They said he wasn't a bad guy, but a man trying to keep things together and show love in a tough situation. They asked the court to look at the whole picture, not just the bad stuff, and how much effort it took to run that kind of family. But even with Kody's side being told, the wives' emotional stories stuck with everyone. The jury, the people watching, and the public had seen a family life that was way different from the TV show. This split, the real man versus the TV guy, the real family versus the show, made a complicated story that wasn't easy to judge. The Brown family's lives were shown to be both amazing, tricky, and deeply human, full of love, stress, and problems with who's in charge, who's free, and who's watching. The judge paused, knowing how big this moment was. The courtroom, which had been full of stress, feelings, and excitement, went quiet. Everyone there seemed to get that this was the end of months or years of guessing, finding proof, and personal struggles. The truths that came out in court had changed the story about Kody Brown and his family forever. As the trial stopped for the day, Kody and his lawyers left, looking serious, but knowing that people saw them differently now. The wives followed, looking relieved, tired, and full of feelings from years of living that way. The media crowded around outside, filming everything, while fans talked about every little thing, every word, and every move. The story of Kody Brown was now bigger than TV. It was a conversation about family, power, and what it costs to live in the public eye. In the next few days, news places looked at everything that had been said. Headlines yelled that Kody Brown had been caught, showing how different he was in public and private. People online shared clips from the courtroom, talked about the emotional moments, and argued about what the trial meant for reality TV, plural marriage, and families. The story hit home, starting talks about who's in charge, how people feel, and how hard it is to have relationships when everyone's watching. For the Brown family, the end of the trial was a turning point. The proof and stories had shown deep issues in their family, how they felt, and how they treated each other, which had been hidden for a long time. While their image had taken a hit, the trial also let them think about things, grow, and maybe be more real with the people around them. Or fans, the revelations showed what was really going on behind sister wives, making them feel something, argue, and be interested. The last parts of the trial showed something important. Reality TV is fun, but it often hides the real feelings and problems of real life. The Brown family's story, now out in the open, showed a world where love, loyalty, authority, and giving it all mixed together in ways that were way more complicated than people knew. Kody Brown, for all his charm, became a person whose life and choices had big knock-on effects on his family. As the courthouse emptied, everyone wondered what would happen next for the Brown family. The revelations had changed how people saw them, revealed personal truths, and started a public talk that would keep going long after the trial. For Kody, the challenge was legal, but also emotional and social. How to rebuild trust, handle relationships, and deal with the fact that his secrets were now out. NP. The trial was over, but the story wasn't. The Brown family, like any family, would keep dealing with their relationships, their feelings, and their lives in the public eye. Fans would keep watching, arguing, and guessing, knowing that what was real behind sister wives was way more complicated, interesting, and human than the show could ever show. And for Kody Brown, the trial was a moment of truth, where private secrets became public, and the world finally saw the messy, emotional reality behind the cameras. One thing was sure: the story of Kody Brown and his family would never be the same. Secrets had been told, truths had been revealed, and the world had seen a family deal with love, loyalty, and authority in ways that most people couldn't imagine. The court had spoken, the public had reacted, and the story of sister wives had been changed forever. The Brown family's story, full of drama, feelings, and complexity, would keep going, but the lessons from the trial, the proof that had come out, and the voices that had finally been heard would stay with everyone, shaping the story of a family that had caught the attention of millions and showed the hidden realities of life, love, and leadership